समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
The Mutual Defense Agreement signed between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia this week shows us how deeply the geopolitical order in the Middle East is buckling. That has something to do with the Israeli combat jet strikes on Qatar last week. For decades, Qatar played all sides, funneling money to Hamas and to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's aides in Israel. It supported the Muslim Brotherhood while at once hosting the biggest United States base in the Middle East. That gave the country great geopolitical heft and made it a model, if not a template, for many other states in the region. But the Israeli airstrikes showed that visibility can end up painting a big target on your back. And now, as we're seeing, countries like Saudi Arabia are scrambling to find allies and partners who can protect them in what's suddenly looking like a very dangerous world. Today, in this episode of Security Code, I'll be talking to you about how Qatar got where it did and why it can't now take that status for granted. There, standing in a grey puddle of light under the glass-domed lounge at the Bayerischer Hof in Munich, Germany, former Afghan spy master Amarullah Saleh understood the nation he had given his life to build was about to die. For almost a decade, the Taliban had received safe haven in Doha, operating a de facto embassy in Doha with diplomatic protections and the blessings of the United States. The Taliban received funds, drew up combat plans, and traveled to meet their top leaders in Karachi and Peshawar. The killings in Afghanistan, though, had continued without interruption, and President Ashraf Ghani had had enough. He turned to the Amir of Qatar and asked him to expel the Taliban. A smile on his face, Saleh recalls, the Amir replied, I quote, well, we've only permitted them to stay in Qatar. Everything else, including their expenses, is managed and overseen by the Central Intelligence Agency. If you want this to end, ask the CIA to stop. Yeah, the CIA and the United States they represented was the upholder of the region's order. The Emirates' role as peacemaker in the Middle East came under assault last week as a squadron of Israeli combat jets targeted the terrorist group Hamas's headquarters, not very far from Doha's famous Corniche. The bombing took place just as Hamas was discussing proposals made by President Donald Trump. There was no reaction, for reasons we don't fully know, from the formidable air defenses at Al Udeid Air Base, home of the Qatar Amiri Air Force, but also the United States Air Force and the United Kingdom's Royal Air Force. For decades, like many other Middle Eastern states, Qatar sought security and prestige under the umbrella of the United States as a tool to secure an end to conflicts in the Middle East. The oil-rich emirate had a simple tool. It had billions of dollars, some of which went to Hamas with the complete approval of the Israeli Prime Minister. It funneled cash to Netanyahu's own aides. It helped the Islamists who had taken power in Syria and thus exerted power from Egypt to Libya to Tunisia. The world order is threatening to buckle under new strains, however, and peacemaking is becoming a more dangerous business. Earlier this year, Al Udeid was hit by Iranian ballistic missiles in retaliation for American attacks on that country's nuclear infrastructure. The Kaaba of the dispossessed, the founding ruler of Qatar, Sheikh Jassim bin Mohammed bin Thani, once called his emirate. Located at the fringes of the reach of two great empires, that is Britain and Turkey, Qatar had long provided safe haven to all those who had reason to flee elsewhere, from pirates to traders and rebels. Late in the 19th century, though, tensions between the tribes grouped around Sheikh Jassim and the Turkish rulers in Istanbul began to escalate. In 1892, Sheikh Jassim won a historic victory against Turkish forces, establishing himself as the region's most important chieftain, historian Habibur Rahman recounts. Inside months of his victory, though, the Sheikh would learn that his imperial patrons in Turkey were in decline. The British, who were committed to the defense of nearby Bahrain, launched a preemptive attack on Sheikh Jafar's forces in 1895. This established the British as the principal power in the Persian Gulf, since the Turks proved in no position to resist. Following the outbreak of the First World War soon afterwards, the Turks evacuated their last outpost in Qatar, after which Jassim's Qatar became a British protectorate. Like other Persian Gulf emirates, Qatar soon found itself confronted with the problem of creating a modern nation-state out of the sand. The discovery of oil in 1950 led some revenues to become available. But the entire country, it's worth noting, did not have a single modern school in operation that year, as scholar David Roberts has written. The one single educational institution was a seminary set up by the Saudi cleric Al-Sheikh Abdul Aziz Al-Manna, who also served as the emirate's only judge. One judge, one school, not a lot of students. The task of setting up an education system fell to Jassim al-Darwish, a former student of Al-Manna. The first school founded in Qatar was up and running in 1951, but it had just 241 students, all boys, who were taught by just 6 male teachers. To hire more recruits, al-Darwish turned through his seminarian contacts to the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna. Al-Banna picked another member of the Islamist group, Abdul Badi Sakar, to head the building of the education system. As Roberts notes, though, these hiring decisions were at least the consequence of opportunity as much as any conscious ideological decision. The availability of educated Muslim Brotherhood cadre in Qatar was the consequence of Egypt's crackdown on the religious right wing, which had sent many of the Brotherhood figures into exile. Later, Khalifa bin Hamad al-Thani, who ruled from 1972 to 1995, also recruited Arab nationalists like the Syrian Abdullah Abd al-Daim. The real force behind the hiring of Islamists in Qatar, though, was, guess who? The United Kingdom. Fearing Arab nationalism and secularism would prove dangerous influences, the British forced the sacking of the Syrian secularist al-Daim. Then in 1958, Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood leader Ezzeddin Ibrahim was appointed Assistant Director of Knowledge in charge of devising a school syllabus. The Director of the Islamic Sciences Division of the Education Department, Abdullah bin Turki al-Subai, was dispatched to the famous Al-Azhar Seminary in Cairo to hire more teachers. The most famous of his hires would turn out to be Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who emerged as a pole star for the Brotherhood in the Gulf with his vicious anti-Semitic speeches. Figures like al-Qaradawi were to play a critical role in what became known as the Islamic Awakening of the 1970s, the ideological movement that laid the grounds for the large-scale recruitment of Arab youth into the anti-Soviet war in Afghanistan and later into various national jihadist movements. Together with other influential figures in the Brotherhood, al-Qaradawi would give religious sanction to so-called martyrdom operations, the suicide attacks we've come to know over the decades. Across the region, British influence was placing Islamists in similar positions of authority, part of a conscious program intended to roll back communist influence. Liaquat Ali Khan, Pakistan's Prime Minister, gave the Islamist leader Tariq Ramadan a radio slot and wrote the foreword to one of his books. The Brotherhood repaid the favor, propagandizing for Pakistani causes in the Middle East. Among other things, Hassan al-Banna described the accession of Hyderabad and Kashmir to India as an illegitimate occupation of Islamic lands. Yet, the Brotherhood were not the only radicals to find safe haven in Qatar. Large numbers of Palestinians displaced from the West Bank and Gaza made a home there, wielding influence in the intelligentsia. Muhammad Yusuf al-Najjar and Kamal Adwan, both later assassinated by Israeli intelligence for their role in the 1973 massacre of Israeli Olympic athletes, spent many years in the Emirates. Learning from the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait that small oil-rich states were also easy prey, Qatar moved to tighten its links with the United States after 1990. From 1996, Qatar sank billions of dollars into Al Udeid Air Base, which currently hosts over 11,000 United States troops and over 100 aircraft. And when needed, Qatar has proved willing to moderate its ties with the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. Following a bruising 6-year spat with its neighbors Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, all of which opposed the Brotherhood, Qatar agreed to scale down the visibility of the Emirates' clients. To many experts, it seems clear the Emirates' alliance with the Islamists was driven by a desire for glory on the world stage, but also insulation. Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, who ruled from 1993 to 2015, believed Qatar would win global support for bringing about Israeli-Palestinian reconciliation. He saw himself, Gil Failer and Haim Zeev argue, as a kind of Islamist Gamal Abdul Nasser, the founder of a new Arab identity. The fact that the Brotherhood could provide some protection against jihadists was, of course, very, very welcome. Even if the current Amir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, isn't driven by those kinds of messianic passions, he clearly understands Qatar derives its value from its parallel ties to Islamists and the West. In Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya, Qatar succeeded in placing Islamists who the West hopes will be able to control those regions. This is, of course, a dangerous game, but fate has placed the Emirates in a part of the world where there's no quiet place in the shade to hide. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.